In a quiet town wrapped in fog and silence, buried secrets are never truly dead. They whisper through cassette tapes, echo in forgotten halls, and claw their way into the present. When Kevin stumbles upon a mysterious voice recorded from the grave, he is drawn into a dark web of hidden experiments, long-buried crimes, and a truth that refuses to stay silent. Alongside Claire, Ivy, and Ethan, he must confront the chilling past of an abandoned asylum and the shadows that still haunt it. But the deeper they dig, the more they realize, some voices were never meant to be heard. Rain fell in scattered drops through the trees, and the wind whispered through the branches like voices of the dead. The cemetery sat at the edge of town, silent and grim, cloaked in the thick fog of an early winter afternoon. The old gravestones, worn by time, leaned crookedly as if bowing under the weight of forgotten memories. Kevin stood still, his eyes fixed on the gravestone marked Andrew Callahan. His heart pounded in his chest, not from the cold, but from something far deeper. He was remembering last night, the night that had dragged him into a waking nightmare. It had started with a phone call. Unknown number. A voice unlike any he had ever heard, hoarse, distant, as if echoing from the grave. Come to the cemetery, he's still alive, listen for his voice, Kevin. Then static. A strange cracking noise, like something splitting far underground. And silence. At first, Kevin thought it was a cruel prank. But the voice haunted him, and sleep never came that night. Memories of Andrew, his best friend who had died 3 years ago in a mysterious fire, came flooding back. Logic told Kevin Andrew was gone. But his heart whispered otherwise. So, just after sunrise, Kevin drove to the cemetery, alone. A low rumble of thunder snapped him out of his thoughts. Kevin took a step closer to the grave, lowering his head. Andrew, he murmured. If you're still alive, give me a sign. Nothing. Kevin gave a bitter smile, about to turn away, when a faint sound reached his ears. He froze. At first, he thought it was the wind. But then he heard it again, clearer this time, someone calling his name from beneath the ground. Kev, in. His chest tightened. He stepped back, wide-eyed. This can't be real. He ran around the grave, dropped to the earth, and pressed his ear to the cold dirt. His heart beat like a drum. Kevin. Again. The voice was soft, strangled, desperate. Kevin sprang up and reached for his phone. He dialed the police. No signal. He tried again, nothing. The screen flashed no service. The wind howled louder, nearly pushing him off balance. The clouds above grew thick and black. He looked around. Not a soul in sight. Just him, and the whisper from below. I can't walk away, Kevin muttered. He ran to his car, popped the trunk, and grabbed the rusty shovel he kept in the back. He returned to the grave and started digging. The earth was heavy and wet, resisting each strike of the shovel. But he kept going, arms aching, muscles burning. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the wooden coffin emerged through the layers of mud. Kevin, drenched in sweat and trembling, cleared the last of the dirt. He knelt down and pressed his ear to the wood. Kevin. This time the voice was unmistakable. Muffled, terrified. Kevin screamed, falling backward. There was no denying it now. With shaking hands, he unlatched the coffin. The hinges creaked like the groan of some ancient beast. A foul, moldy smell hit him. Inside was nothing. No body. Only an old cassette tape, lying alone in the middle of the coffin. Kevin hesitated, then picked it up. On its surface, scrawled in jagged ink, were the words. Listen and remember, because I'm watching. His heart pounded like a hammer. Slowly, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a handheld tape player, a relic from his days as an investigative journalist. He slid the tape in and hit play. A burst of static. Then a voice, raspy, weak, but familiar. Kevin, if you're hearing this, then you never stopped believing I was alive. You were right. But I can't come back. They're watching me, and now, they might be watching you too. Kevin froze. It was Andrew's voice. "No doubt. I found something they didn't want me to find. I thought you were safe. But if you've come here, then you're already involved. Claire too. You need to find Ethan. He knows." The tape cut off. Kevin stared at the cassette, his thoughts spiraling. Claire, Andrew's ex-girlfriend, was living on the outskirts of town now. Ethan, Andrew's former colleague, had vanished after Andrew's death. Some said he'd gone off the grid. Others whispered darker things. Kevin rose to his feet and ran to his car. The rain had turned to a downpour, lightning ripping through the sky like claws. But Kevin didn't care anymore. He started the engine, gripping the wheel hard. A secret buried for years. A voice from the grave. A warning wrapped in fear. And a road ahead, one that might cost him his life. The hunt had begun. The morning mist still clung to the trees like fading shadows when Kevin returned to the cemetery. The sun had barely begun its climb, its light pale and weak against the lingering gloom. His breath came out in puffs of white as he stepped through the iron gates, each creak of the hinges sounding like an omen. This time, he wasn't alone. Claire followed closely behind him, her long coat buttoned tight, her eyes flicking to every movement in the distance. She wasn't the type to be easily rattled, years working in missing persons had hardened her, but something about Kevin's story had burrowed under her skin. A voice from beneath the grave. A message no one else heard. And now, a cassette tape, its content cryptic, almost prophetic. "What are we looking for again?" she whispered, not wanting to disturb the eerie quiet. Kevin paused at the edge of Mr. Thompson's grave. "Proof," he replied simply, kneeling beside the disturbed earth. "Something no one buried should know." Claire knelt beside him. "The caretaker said this spot was untouched." "He's lying. Or he's scared." Kevin ran his fingers over the soil. The night before, it had shifted, he was sure of it. In the cassette, the tape had described something buried, something hidden near the one who watches. That line repeated in his mind like a chant. Claire tilted her head, scanning the rows of weathered tombstones. The one who watches. She moved to the left, scanning names. Then she stopped. "Here," she called out. Kevin joined her. The stone was different, an angel stood over it, its face staring eternally forward, arms outstretched in quiet judgment. Its eyes seemed almost too lifelike, as though it was watching not the living, but the secrets of the dead. The name on the grave read: Elizabeth Crowley. 1942 to 2001. She saw what others refused. Kevin shivered. "That's it. That's the one." They stood in silence for a beat too long. "Dig?" Claire asked, though the idea clearly unnerved her. Kevin reached into his pack and pulled out a small collapsible shovel. "We won't go deep. Just enough to see." They worked in silence, digging carefully into the soil beside the stone, not disturbing the grave itself. The dirt was soft, too soft. After just a few minutes, Kevin's shovel struck something hard. His heart quickened. He scraped away more soil until a corner of rusted metal appeared. Claire helped, brushing away the earth until the full shape emerged, a small, locked metal box. "No key?" Claire asked. Kevin shook his head. With a quick motion, he pried it open using the flat of the shovel. Inside was another cassette tape, sealed in a plastic bag, along with a Polaroid photograph, faded, grainy, and sinister in its simplicity. A man in a suit, standing beside Elizabeth's grave, looking directly into the camera. The timestamp read, August 17, 2003. Claire frowned. She died in 2001. The man shouldn't have been there 2 years later. Kevin turned over the photo. Scrawled in ink were the words, "Don't let Ethan hear this." Claire's breath caught. "Ethan?" Kevin's hands trembled as he turned the tape over in his fingers. A label was written in the same shaky handwriting as the last. Tape 02, The Stranger Beneath. They didn't listen to it at the graveyard. They didn't speak on the way back to the car, either. The weight of what they'd found pressed in on them like the sky itself had grown heavier. Back at Claire's apartment, they sat around her old tape deck. Kevin gently inserted the cassette and pressed play. The static came first, louder than last time, almost violent. Then the voice returned. Hoarse. Raspy. Still undeniably human. He walks the surface, but his heart remains buried. You've met him, haven't you? He hides behind smiles. Behind hollow words. But he knows. He remembers. That night, the fire, the scream that didn't end. You need to ask Ethan what really happened in the woods that summer. Ask him why the girl never came back. The tape hissed for a moment, then the voice returned, quieter, urgent. You think I'm dead. But I am watching. And he is listening. That's why you must not trust him. Ethan knows. Ethan lied. The blood on the tree, that wasn't an accident. Then silence. Followed by a click. Claire stared at the player like it had just burst into flame. What the hell is this? Kevin looked away, his mind spinning. He hadn't told Claire everything. Not yet. Kevin? He swallowed. There was a girl. Years ago. When Ethan and I were 16. She disappeared near Old Pine Hill. They said she ran away. You were there? He nodded, the memory sharp now. She was with us that night. Her name was Emily. We took her to the lake. We were drinking. I passed out. Ethan said she walked off angry. No one ever found her. Claire rubbed her temples. And you never questioned that? I tried, Kevin said. But Ethan, he was convincing. He cried. Said he looked for her for hours. I wanted to believe him. Claire's voice hardened. And now someone buried under the ground is telling you he lied. Kevin looked back at the tape recorder. Not just that. They're saying he killed her. Claire stood, pacing. We need more than voices on tape. We need evidence. Kevin looked down at the Polaroid again. Then we go to Old Pine Hill. They drove out that night. The woods loomed like sentinels, tall and grim. The path to the old campsite was overgrown, long abandoned. Kevin hadn't been here in years. Every step sent memories crashing over him, laughter, a flickering fire, the sharp crack of branches snapping underfoot. Claire held a flashlight, sweeping it side to side. Where did you last see her? Kevin pointed to a clearing. There. We built a fire. She was sitting by that log. Claire approached it slowly, scanning the ground. She stopped suddenly. Kevin, look. He hurried over. Near the edge of the clearing, a tree stood scarred. Its bark was split near the base, a deep gash slicing through the trunk. And below it, faded but still visible, a patch of dried red staining the roots. Claire crouched down, inspecting the mark. This is old. Really old. But it's blood. Kevin said nothing, just stared. Then Claire froze. Kevin. Someone's watching us. He turned. A figure moved just beyond the tree-line, too fast to see clearly, but real enough to send panic through his chest. They didn't wait. They ran. Back at the car, Claire locked the doors immediately. We need to go to the police. Kevin shook his head. And tell them what? That a dead man left us cassette tapes? That Ethan might have killed someone 15 years ago based on a tree and a voice? Claire stared at him, frustration and fear mixing in her eyes. Then what do we do? Kevin looked down at the cassette in his hands. We find the next tape. The sun barely pierced through the grim overcast sky as Kevin tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The road ahead coiled like a serpent through dense forest, the branches arching overhead as if nature itself was closing in around them. Claire sat in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the old cassette in her hands, fingers trembling slightly. I still can't believe we heard that voice, she whispered, glancing at Kevin. She knew things, specific things. How is that possible? Kevin's eyes remained forward, his jaw tense. I don't know. But I'm starting to believe we were never supposed to find those tapes. Claire's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, another anonymous message. 3 words, do not listen. Her heart skipped. Kevin, look at this. He glanced at the screen, then back at the road. That's the 3rd warning today. Someone knows we have the tapes. Maybe we shouldn't keep going, she said, her voice cracking. Maybe we should turn around and... Kevin slammed the brakes. Claire jolted forward, the cassette nearly flying from her hands. What the hell? In the middle of the road stood a figure, a man, face partially concealed by a dark hood, motionless. Kevin rolled down the window a fraction. Hey! You all right? The figure took a step forward. Claire's breath caught. Suddenly, a car roared from behind them, headlights flashing. Kevin swerved just in time to avoid being sandwiched. The hooded figure dashed into the woods, vanishing like smoke. Kevin's heart pounded. That wasn't random. Someone's trying to stop us. Claire stared out into the trees. We're in something deep, Kevin. This isn't just about a girl who died. This is something bigger. They pressed on in silence, the atmosphere in the car now suffocating. Claire clutched the cassette as if it were a life raft. The coordinates from the last tape led them to a derelict town on the edge of the county, Rust Water, a forgotten place long wiped off official maps after a flood wiped out half the population a decade ago. The town was eerie, abandoned homes swallowed by ivy, shop fronts shattered and blackened by time. Only the wind dared speak here, whispering through the crumbling skeletons of buildings. This place is dead, Claire said. Why here? Kevin held up the tape recorder. Because she wants us to find something. This place, it meant something to her. They reached what had once been a church. Its steeple lay sideways, snapped like a twig. On the door, someone had etched a single word in faded red paint, sanctuary. Inside, the pews were overturned, mold spreading like disease across the walls. Claire found an altar half buried in debris. She crouched, brushed the dust aside, and there, beneath the loose floorboard, was another cassette. Kevin's breath caught. Another one. Claire inserted the tape into the recorder and hit play. Static. Then a girl's voice, tired, broken, yet resolute. If you've come this far, then you're not afraid. Good. Because what I'm about to tell you can't be unheard. This town, it wasn't just forgotten. It was erased. They made sure of that. My name is Ivy. And I was 14 when I found the truth. Claire looked at Kevin. Ivy? The voice continued. They called it an accident. But I know what I saw. A girl, her name was Marlene, was taken from here. She screamed. No one came. I followed them to the basement of this church. What I saw, what they did, it changed everything. A sharp crackle. This isn't just about me. It's about all the girls who disappeared. The ones no one remembered. They kept records. Proof. In the place where the river bends twice, beneath the roots. Kevin stopped the tape. Did she just say, proof? Claire nodded. She mentioned a basement. They searched the church, pulling aside rubble and rotted wood. Eventually, behind the altar, they uncovered a trapdoor, chained shut. Kevin retrieved a crowbar from the trunk and pried it open. The air that rose was foul, like wet soil and decay. Claire gagged. They descended into darkness. The basement was vast, far larger than the church itself. As they moved deeper, their flashlights flickered over long-forgotten relics, broken chairs, children's shoes, scraps of torn fabric. Then they found the wall. It was covered in photographs. Girls. Young. Smiling. Innocent. All pinned in rows. Names written beneath each. Marlene. Ivy. Daniela. Ruth. Claire's voice cracked. These are the missing girls. Beside the wall stood filing cabinets, rusted and dented. Kevin forced one open. Inside, folders, reports, handwritten notes. He flipped one open and read aloud. Subject, Ruth C. Age, 16. Transfer to Phase 2. Observation continues. Subject shows resistance. Claire clutched her chest. They experimented on them? A loud bang echoed above. They froze. Footsteps. Claire whispered, "Someone's here." They turned off their flashlights. In the pitch black, Kevin pulled her behind a cabinet. The trapdoor creaked. Then silence. More footsteps, slow and deliberate, descended the stairs. Claire's heartbeat thundered in her ears. A beam of light scanned the basement, back and forth, methodical. The figure paused by the wall of photos. A low voice murmured, "You shouldn't have come here." Kevin recognized the voice. It was the same man from the roadside. Claire's nails dug into his arm. "What do we do?" Kevin spotted a side door barely visible behind a curtain of pipes. He motioned to it silently. They crept toward it as the man's flashlight turned away. Suddenly, Claire's foot struck a rusted can. It clattered across the floor. The light snapped toward them. "Run!" Kevin yelled. They bolted through the door into a narrow corridor, the man's footsteps pounding behind them. The tunnel twisted and forked. Kevin made a split-second decision, yanking Claire to the right. The tunnel opened into a chamber filled with murky water. Pipes snaked across the ceiling. At the far end, daylight. They splashed through the knee-deep water, breath ragged. A bullet ricocheted off the wall near Kevin's head. They dove behind a fallen beam. Kevin turned to Claire. "On my signal, run. I'll cover you." "No. Go!" He shoved her forward, standing to draw the man's fire. Claire sprinted for the light, dodging debris. The man fired again, missed. Kevin followed seconds later. They emerged outside, gasping, mud-slicked and bleeding. Behind them, the figure stopped short at the tunnel's mouth. He didn't pursue, just watched. Claire raised her phone and snapped a photo. He vanished back into the shadows. Hours later, they sat in a dingy motel room, the cassette playing again. Beneath the roots, Ivy's voice repeated. Claire stared at the screen of her laptop. "The river bends twice just south of here. There's an old orchard nearby, maybe that's what she meant by roots." Kevin leaned back. "If we find those files, those records, then we can prove this whole thing. Expose whoever's behind it." Claire whispered, "And give the girls justice." Kevin looked at her, weary but resolute. "Tomorrow, we go to the orchard." Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere, in the dark, a phone buzzed once more. A new message. One word, "Stop." The entrance to the church basement yawned open like a secret too long buried. The rusted hinges groaned in protest as Kevin pushed the door wider, the musty air from below rising like a whisper from the crypt. Ivy followed closely, holding her flashlight like a dagger, slicing through the dark. Claire stayed just behind them, her breath shaky but determined. Each step downward echoed eerily against stone walls. The beam of Ivy's light flickered across faded murals, figures of saints and angels, their faces flaked away by time, as if they'd turned their backs on the place. "It smells like rot," Claire muttered, covering her nose. "Like something died down here." "No," Kevin said, pausing. "It's not just rot. That's formaldehyde." They all froze. Ivy swept the light across the walls, landing on a wooden door embedded in the far end of the corridor. It bore a black stain in the shape of a handprint. Something about it made Kevin's skin crawl. He touched Claire's shoulder. "You don't have to come," he said. Claire shook her head. "I do. Whatever's down here, it's part of why my mother never came home." Kevin nodded and reached for the door. His fingers brushed the handle, and suddenly, a noise erupted behind them. A loud, crashing clatter from upstairs. They all jumped. "Stay here," Kevin said, pulling the gun from his belt. I'll check. No way, Ivy hissed, stepping beside him. We're not splitting up again. Kevin glanced at her. For once, there was no sarcasm in her eyes, just fear. He nodded grimly. Together, they crept back up the stairs. At the top, the main church hall was empty. Dust motes danced in the beams of moonlight through the cracked stained glass windows. Nothing seemed out of place, until Claire pointed. The lectern. It was facing the other way before. Someone had been here. Then they heard it again, barely audible this time. A faint shuffle, like something dragging across the floor. Kevin raised his gun. They followed the sound, Ivy keeping the flashlight steady, heartbeats pounding in their ears. It led them to the back of the church, where an old confessional booth stood. The curtain twitched. Kevin raised his gun. Step out. Slowly. No response. He motioned to Ivy. She threw the curtain open. Empty. Except for a small, red cassette tape lying on the bench. Claire stepped forward slowly, as if in a trance. She picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. There was no label, just a smear of dried blood on the corner. Kevin took it from her gently. Let's get back down there. This has to be part of it. They returned to the basement, this time with a growing sense of urgency. Kevin inserted the new tape into the old recorder they'd brought. Static hissed, then a voice began, slow, raspy, deliberate. They thought burying me would be the end. But I was never the one who needed hiding. The real monster wore a badge. Claire's eyes widened. That's my mother's voice. If you're hearing this, you found the church. You followed the trail. And you know by now, the story they fed you wasn't the truth. I found the children. I saw the room. The chains. I saw what he did. The tape clicked off. Silence. Ivy's voice cracked. What chains? Kevin's flashlight landed on a nearby wall, and then on something that made his blood run cold. A thin seam. A hidden door. He pushed it open. Inside was a room, no larger than a storage closet. But what it contained would haunt them forever. Shackles bolted to the walls. A rusted bed frame, stained. Child-sized shoes, abandoned in a corner. Claire let out a choked sob. Oh my God, Ivy whispered. She was telling the truth. Kevin stepped forward, hands shaking. He took photos with his phone. This is evidence. Real evidence. But before they could do more, they heard footsteps again. This time, heavier. Approaching the basement stairs. Kevin backed away from the hidden room, motioning the others to silence. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairwell. Then a voice, gruff and unfamiliar, called down. I know you're down there. Come out now, and maybe we talk like adults. Claire gripped Kevin's arm. Who is that? Ivy's mouth trembled. That's not a cop's voice. That's... They didn't wait to find out. Kevin led them deeper into the basement, searching for another exit. The walls began to close in, the air tightening. Then, another voice, echoing from behind. I said, come out. This time, it wasn't just a threat. A gunshot rang out, shattering part of the stairwell wall. Move! Kevin shouted, pulling Claire behind an old filing cabinet. They ran, through winding corridors until they found a broken tunnel leading beneath the church. Ivy clambered through first, flashlight still in hand, Kevin behind her with Claire in the middle. They crawled through damp darkness, the sound of pursuit behind them growing louder. Whoever was after them wasn't alone. Why are they doing this? Claire gasped, nearly tripping on a jagged root. Kevin didn't answer. But the pieces were falling into place. The tapes. The hidden room. The police cover-up. And now, armed men protecting the secrets. The tunnel opened at last into an overgrown shed behind the church. They burst out into the night air, gasping. We need to get to Ethan, Kevin said, wiping sweat from his brow. He's the only one who can get this out fast. Claire held up her phone. I've got bars. I'm calling him now. But as she dialed, Ivy froze. Wait, where's the car? The gravel lot where they'd parked earlier was empty. Claire's call went to voicemail. And on the far end of the field, headlights flared to life, then began speeding toward them. Kevin raised his gun again, eyes scanning for cover. They were out of time. The headlights bore down on them like twin eyes of some ancient predator, hungry and relentless. Kevin pushed Claire and Ivy behind the ruined shed just as the tires screeched across the gravel. A truck, black and unmarked, slid to a halt, its driver's side door already swinging open. Run! Kevin hissed. Claire hesitated, her trembling hand clutching the cassette tape. But Ivy grabbed her arm, and the two darted toward the woods behind the church. Kevin stayed behind, crouching low, raising his gun as a tall man stepped out of the truck, dressed in all black, face obscured by a balaclava. Last warning, the man shouted. You leave that tape behind and we forget this happened. Kevin fired once, a warning shot that bit into the dirt near the man's boots. The attacker didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his own weapon, and suddenly, bullets tore into the shed as Kevin dove for cover. Wood exploded. Debris rained down. Kevin rolled out the back and sprinted after the others, lungs burning. They ran without speaking, feet pounding against the wet forest floor. Branches slashed their faces. Roots clawed at their ankles. The trees seemed to lean in, trapping them, guiding them deeper into some forgotten place. Eventually, they collapsed in a shallow ravine. Kevin pressed a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. All around them, stillness. Ivy gasped for air, hand gripping her ribs. Who the hell are these people? Claire clutched the tape to her chest. They killed my mother. Didn't they? Kevin looked at her, really looked at her. There was no fear in her eyes anymore. Just a growing fire. Yes, he said quietly. They did. They stayed hidden for nearly an hour, listening for footsteps that never came. Then, with aching limbs and haunted silence, they made their way toward the only person they could trust, Ethan. Back in town, Ethan paced in front of his computer screen. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The documents he'd recovered from the courthouse basement, a sealed evidence file labeled only Case 49B91, lay spread across his desk. Photos. Testimonies. Crime scene sketches. And one name repeated over and over. Captain Thomas Redford. The decorated police officer who led the original investigation into Claire's mother's disappearance. Only now, Ethan was looking at a very different picture. Victims' statements suppressed. Evidence discarded. Witnesses intimidated into silence. A girl named Lily Vega had claimed she saw a man, matching Redford's description, dragging a screaming woman into the church. Her testimony was marked unreliable due to age and trauma. Ethan's fingers trembled over the keyboard as he typed a search query. Captain Thomas Redford, current status, retired. Living in Fair Hollow Estates. He leaned back in his chair, heart racing. He barely had time to shut his laptop when his phone rang. Claire's name lit up the screen. Claire! Thank God. We don't have time, she interrupted. They're after us. Someone tried to kill Kevin. We have a new tape, my mother's voice again. We need to meet. Ethan's pulse jumped. Where are you? She rattled off a location on the outskirts of town, an old ranger station deep in the forest. Abandoned for years, but still standing. Got it, Ethan said. I'll bring backup. No, Kevin's voice came through the phone suddenly. No cops. Not until we know who we can trust. Ethan nodded grimly. Then we go dark. I'm on my way. The ranger station sat at the edge of a moss-covered clearing, surrounded by twisted pines. Moonlight spilled through the broken windows, casting jagged shadows across the floor. Ivy had managed to light an old kerosene lamp, its flickering glow illuminating the dust-choked room. Ethan arrived shortly after midnight, breathless and wide-eyed. He embraced Claire without hesitation. "You're alive," he whispered. "So far," she muttered. Kevin wasted no time. He handed Ethan the cassette. "Play it." Ethan nodded and fed it into a portable recorder. Static filled the air, then the familiar voice of Claire's mother. "I followed Redford that night. I saw him go into the church. I saw the boy, just a child, chained in that room. He told me they'd been bringing kids here for years. Runaways. Orphans. No one to miss them. Redford saw me. He told me it was justice. That the world needed balance. I ran. I made it to the graveyard and left the first tape, but I knew I wouldn't get far. So if you're hearing this, know that they are still out there. Watching. Waiting." The tape ended. Silence fell like a curtain. Claire buried her face in her hands. Kevin looked at Ethan. She knew everything. And they silenced her. Ethan nodded slowly. "And Redford, he's still alive." Ivy stood up, her voice sharp. "Then we confront him." Kevin frowned. "We can't just knock on his door." Ethan tapped his laptop. "We don't need to. I hacked into his old dispatch logs. There's a cabin he used for field work. No official record of it, but it pops up in several redacted reports." He turned the screen around. A satellite image of a cabin deep in the forest appeared. No neighbors. No cell service. Just him. Kevin narrowed his eyes. "Then that's where we go." Claire's voice was quiet but firm. He has to answer for what he did. They left before dawn, hiking through dense woods. Fog clung to the ground like a secret. Birds scattered at their approach. The cabin appeared as a silhouette, low and rotting, swallowed by vines and ivy. Kevin motioned for silence. They approached carefully, circling around to the back. A window was cracked open. Ivy slipped in first, followed by Claire, Ethan, and finally Kevin. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule. Dust-covered furniture. A yellowed calendar from 1991 still pinned to the wall. And on a table, an old reel-to-reel recorder. Ethan examined it. He's still listening to the tapes. A creak from upstairs made them all freeze. Kevin raised his gun. He pointed upward. Ivy nodded, taking the lead. Step by step, they climbed the stairs. At the top, a bedroom door was ajar. Kevin pushed it open. Redford sat in a rocking chair by the window. White beard. Hollow eyes. A shotgun rested across his lap. "I knew you'd come," he said, voice raspy but calm. "I've been waiting." Claire stepped forward. "You killed her." He looked at her, his eyes watery. "I tried to save her." Ethan snapped. "By covering up a child trafficking ring? By killing witnesses?" Redford didn't flinch. "You don't understand. We didn't kill them. We cleansed them. They were broken. The world chewed them up and spat them out. We gave them purpose." Claire's face twisted in horror. "You're insane." Redford smiled faintly. "No, child. I'm enlightened." Kevin stepped forward. "Where are the others? Who else was involved?" Redford's gaze drifted to the window. "You think I was the only one? You think this ends with me?" He gripped the shotgun suddenly. Kevin fired first. The blast echoed through the cabin. Redford collapsed sideways in his chair, the weapon falling from his hands. Silence. Then, sobbing, from Claire. Ivy held her tightly, guiding her out of the room. Kevin walked to the body and found something clenched in Redford's other hand, a key. And under the floorboards, a locked trapdoor. "What now?" Ivy asked, trembling. Kevin looked at them. "We open it." The rain poured mercilessly over the crooked rooftops of the abandoned asylum as Kevin stood still, eyes fixed on the flickering monitor inside the dusty surveillance room. Ivy's voice, hoarse and laced with panic, crackled over the radio. "Claire's gone. 1 second she was behind me, and now she's not. Kevin, something's wrong here. This place, it's not just old and empty. It feels like it's watching. Kevin's fingers tightened around the receiver. The room felt colder now, as if the building itself were exhaling frost. They had come too far to let it fall apart now. Ethan was on the second floor, hunting through rusted filing cabinets for Dr. Langford's confidential records, documents that might finally name the man behind the murders recorded on the cassette tapes. "Ivy, stay where you are," Kevin said, trying to sound calm. "Don't go looking for Claire. That's what it wants. Wait for me, and we'll go together." He turned, flashlight sweeping across the long corridor behind him. Every surface was stained and decayed, water pooling beneath his boots. As he walked, the walls began to feel closer, the air denser. Then, he heard it, a soft clicking sound behind him. Mechanical. Repetitive. Click. Whir. Stop. He spun around, nothing. Just the dripping ceiling and shadowed hallway. But then he saw it, tucked into a narrow vent along the wall, a cassette player, its wheels still turning, the tape whispering a distorted voice into the stale air. He crouched, carefully pressing play. "You can't save her. Not from me. Not from the truth." Kevin yanked the tape out. The same voice. The same taunting tone that had followed them since the first tape was discovered. He shoved it into his bag and broke into a run. Downstairs, Ivy waited in the foyer, hands trembling as she tried to reload her flashlight. It had flickered out moments ago, just as the wind howled through a broken window pane, and just before she heard Claire scream. Now, there was only silence, and the creaking groan of the ancient building. "Ivy!" Kevin called, sliding around the corner. She spun around, relief flashing in her eyes. "We need to find Claire. Something's taken her, someone." Kevin nodded grimly. "But we're not alone. I found another tape." Same voice. "Then it's not over," Ivy said. "We still don't know who's behind it all." At that moment, Ethan's voice came over the radio, strained and breathless. "I found it. The patient records. Langford kept a secret archive. He was covering up for someone funding the asylum. I think we're dealing with a lot more than just one killer." "Where are you?" Kevin asked. "Third floor. South wing. But be careful. There's movement. I don't think I'm alone up here." They ran. The staircase groaned under their weight as they climbed, every step vibrating with eerie resonance. On the third floor, the air was thick with mold and something else, coppery, like dried blood. They found Ethan in a decaying office, a stack of crumbling folders spread before him. He looked up, his face pale. "It's not just Langford. He was protecting someone named Vincent Hawthorne, name kept popping up in the invoices and prescription forms. He wasn't a doctor. He was a benefactor. And he visited the asylum often." Kevin's heart skipped. "That's the same name that was scrawled on the wall in Claire's basement." Ethan nodded. "And get this, he had access to the patient wards at all times. No clearance needed." Ivy glanced around. Then what was he doing here? What would a financier want with mentally ill patients? Kevin's voice was low. He wasn't just observing. He was experimenting. The silence that followed was suffocating. They scanned the rest of the room, searching for clues. Then Kevin found it, a hidden drawer in the desk, locked but brittle with age. He pried it open, revealing a set of photographs, yellowed with time. They showed patients in various stages of distress, some strapped down, others screaming. In every photo, a tall man in a white coat stood beside them, face half obscured. But then Ethan flipped one photo over and froze. "Guys," he whispered. "This one, that's Claire's father. The man in the coat." Kevin took it and stared. It was unmistakable. Claire's father, Dr. Nathaniel Graves, smiling coldly as he restrained a patient whose mouth was stitched shut. The revelation struck like a blow to the chest. He was working here. He lied to us, Ivy said. Claire didn't know, did she? She couldn't have, Kevin muttered. Or maybe that's why she came here in the first place. Maybe the tapes, the voices, they're all linked to him. A low rumble vibrated through the floor. The lights flickered violently, and then went out. They were plunged into darkness. Ethan grabbed his flashlight, but before he could flick it on, a scream tore through the corridor. Claire! Kevin didn't wait. He ran, Ivy and Ethan close behind. The scream had come from the far end of the south wing. The hallway twisted, warped, and Kevin swore the shadows moved just out of sight. They burst into a room, and there she was. Claire, strapped to a rusted operating table, eyes wide with terror. Above her stood a man, pale, sharp-featured, with a long surgical coat stained with age. He looked up as they entered. "Ah," he said calmly. "The curious ones." Kevin raised the flashlight. The man didn't flinch. "I've been waiting," the figure continued. "You wanted truth. But it never comes without cost." Ivy moved first, rushing to Claire's side, unbuckling her restraints. The man didn't stop her. He merely stared at Kevin, eyes hollow. "You've heard my voice before," he said. "On the tapes. In your dreams. In every crack of every floorboard. I am memory. I am echo. Who are you?" Kevin demanded. The man smiled. "Vincent Hawthorne. And your arrival marks the final chapter." Suddenly, the walls began to tremble. A rumble like thunder shook the asylum. Tiles cracked. Ceiling beams groaned. "We have to go," Ethan shouted. But Hawthorne moved fast. He grabbed a switch on the wall and pulled it. A metal door slammed shut behind them. "You're not leaving," he whispered. "You came for truth. You'll die with it." Then he lunged. Kevin tackled him, the two crashing to the ground. Ivy and Ethan scrambled to pry open the door, Claire still dazed. Hawthorne fought like an animal, scratching, biting. Kevin punched hard, once, twice, until the man slumped. "Now!" Kevin screamed. Together, they forced the door open just as smoke began to fill the halls. Hawthorne had started a fire somewhere in the building. Flames lit the far end of the corridor. They ran. Through the stairwell. Down the hallway. Past the haunted echoes of the patient's cries. The building groaned one last time, and collapsed behind them. They burst into the night, coughing, covered in ash. Fire consumed the asylum, flames reaching toward the sky like claws. Claire fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "He was my father's partner," she whispered. "Maybe more. They used the patients for experiments. The tapes, they were warnings." Kevin put a hand on her shoulder. "It's over now." But deep inside, he knew it wasn't. Not truly. The tapes still existed. The secrets, the crimes, they couldn't be undone. Days later, the police and federal agents swarmed the ruins. Most of the evidence was destroyed. Hawthorne's body was never recovered. Some say he died in the flames. Others weren't so sure. Kevin, Ivy, Ethan, and Claire walked away changed. Scarred. But alive. And in Kevin's coat pocket, one last cassette remained, unmarked, untouched. He never played it. Some truths, he decided, were meant to stay buried. The fire consumed the building, but not the past. Though the asylum now lay in ashes, its horrors lived on, in memories, in scars, and in the final unplayed tape resting in Kevin's pocket. They had survived the nightmare, but not without cost. What they uncovered changed everything, binding them to a truth darker than any of them had imagined. Some stories are meant to be told, others are meant to stay buried. But the voice on that last cassette still waits, silent for now, but always ready to speak again.